So this is Justin Peterson. I'm giving my final essay for the 499 capstone. Overall, now that I've given my presentation, this was actually one of the better classes that I had. I didn't expect it to be, but it was a lot less stressful than I had initially envisioned. Um, Mostly, I think, due to the pacing of the class, in that we had a day of, often had a day of class and a day of everything else. But that actually made it a great deal easier to do this work as well as do the work of everything else that I had to do this semester. Without that, I certainly wouldn't have been able to do this paper. Um, so my successes are that, and I think I was able to put together a decent paper and a decent presentation. Um, that weren't necessarily fantastic, but they were good enough to pass muster, I believe. I hope. I don't know what my grade is, so we'll see. But I think that they were well made, well thought out, and my points were valid. And I think that I was able to do all of that um, because I uh, was able to be forgiven for a lot of my timing issues. Basically, the pacing of the class and the fact that as long as we had everything by the deadline, we weren't necessarily too punished for not having the steps along the way at the same time. Everybody else did. We hit all the steps. As long as I hit all the steps, and if I was a week behind getting the paper finished, or if I was only showed up with seven slides or 5 pages to some of the readings and rehearsals, that wasn't necessarily a problem as long as I got it there at the end. And that helped a lot towards the success I think I had with the overall paper. Challenges. For challenges, I had the same challenges probably everybody has, honestly. The whole issue of being of trying to produce a paper of this length, of this depth, in which I had never done so before. I hit a point where I didn't write on my paper for like 2.5 weeks or more, maybe, because I just hit writer's block. I just couldn't figure it out. And this came up in my conferences a lot, but I was just at a point where I knew what I needed to do. I just couldn't move on. White page. So the idea of so that was the big challenge to overcome, was just getting everything put onto paper. Once I had that, editing and revision and stuff, that came a lot easier. That was far more a smoother process. But yeah, for me, it was just general content creation was the main challenge. If I had to do it over again, I would definitely work more earlier in the semester. I mean, that's probably what everybody says, is do stuff earlier. Um, but I would take time to force myself to write, where I just sat down with me and a page and a blank page and put stuff on paper until I had something workable. Which is eventually how I got over the challenges in the beginning. I think I would work harder to stick to the schedule, because that way I wasn't quite as backloaded and such. So it's an issue of basically it all kind of the challenge and the do-over kind of stem from the same problem of not being in the right mind space to create content, and finding a way to get into that mind space sooner. What else do you need to know? I had already worked on this topic before. I had done some stuff on this kind of topic with my previous classes on pedagogy, in which I had the general theme of using anime or other classes comics, but in this case using anime to teach. I had already written lesson plans on that with a previous class. So I already had some of the research, and I had some of the ideas to start with. Didn't necessarily help me when it came to content creation because the brain's a weird thing. Um, so having the starting topic was easy. Refining that topic came a little more difficult. Um, but that was mostly an issue of there aren't a whole lot of resources. This is kind of the research topic, but there aren't a whole lot of resources for using anime in a pedagogical sense. There's all of it comes down to the same idea that the big problem with anime is you have to justify its existence in the classroom. You have to say that no, this is a valid thing to read, which is why in my presentation a little bit later on in my paper, I focused on the good things that the anime that RWBY can offer, and not necessarily the things that I would do with the anime, because right now the fight of over anime is still just it's using it in the classroom. Comic books are getting in that area where they're being accepted and used in the classroom, at least in college levels. But animation, cartoons, and that kind of stuff aren't. It still seems a lesser art form, and so we have to justify using it, justify looking at it. I was tempted, back on topic, to use a Miyazaki film instead of RWBY, but I thought that, and the Miyazaki films like Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa Valley of the Wind are beautiful, fantastic films with a lot of theme and a lot of message, and could easily be used to teach a class. But I thought that the way RWBY presents itself in this idea of a segmented episodes made it a lot more digestible. And because, again, RWBY's made by Americans, and so as an intro anime, it's very effective because the culture isn't that different. Even though the initial creator is Japanese American, it's still basically an American artifact, whereas most anime is a purely or a largely Japanese artifact. And while so basically RWBY is just the more digestible option. Since I'm still dealing with justifying its existence, more digestible is good. So that's kind of how the topic got refined, where I kind of decided whether I want to do it, and it came down to finding ways to basically, because my paper is generally all about saying you can do this with a book, and you can do it with an anime, and here's how. And so that's what the paper became, is saying, yes, this is a thing, yeah, but that's animated and weird and kind of is funny sometimes and all this stuff, but it is just as valid as any young adult fiction thing. But so there's not a lot of research that goes into the real pedagogical methods of doing so. It's just a moment of, no, this is still young adult literature. So that's why the paper went the way it did, is because the research is that is still in that setting. With a little more time and a little more inclusion, if we ever get it, perhaps we can move into actually teaching the literacy of anime in this method of, these are the things, like it's like teaching a film course, focusing on animation and teaching that variety of literacy, but the culture isn't there yet. I thought the paper turned out okay in that respect, because I did manage to figure out some true pedagogical things to do with the anime that are kind of unique to it. Its approach to character creation, all that kind of stuff. So I think that if I had more time to work on it, I would have developed a full lesson plan as an example. That way I could show kind of, if I had enough time to work on it and permission from a teacher, I would have done a lesson plan on it with my clinicals, just to see if I could prove proof of concept, Of course, I never had that opportunity. And I don't think that I would be really surprised if some teacher let a random level 2 person just be like, I'm going to teach anime. That's not going to happen. But if in an ideal world, I would like to get a little more meat and bones with it, a little more meat and bones, meat and potatoes with it, and get into kind of the real things you can do with that idea of writing a fan fiction. Or if I had enough, even more time, I would have actually liked to write a fan fiction on it based on this pedagogical approach. So, or if I could get a kid to write a fan fiction on it based on the pedagogical approach and include it as evidence. Um, the presentation of that, turning that, luckily, Ruby being visual, turning it into a visual presentation isn't particularly hard. It was actually a conversation I had to have with myself about how much video to include, because it's a video. It's, unlike a lot of other things, it doesn't exist in book form anywhere. It's just a visual format. So only including the 2 very short clips that I did was a conscious decision to do that, because if I could have just been like, nope, we are doing all of this with a clip every 30 words or something like that, because then I could show rather than tell. But given the format, I decided that telling was probably more important and more worthwhile than showing. I think my slides turned out basically okay. Of course, the fastest way to find an error is to present it with something. So, of course, I had some formatting issues in my slides I thought I caught and didn't. If I had more time to work on them, I might have changed the formatting, because usually almost all my slides are words left hand, picture right hand side. I might have used different pictures. I might have used different backgrounds. I might have found more dynamic moments to use, because all the pictures I used could have come straight out of a comic book in their composition and everything. I would have liked to be more dynamic, because I feel that giving this presentation as I did sort of does a disservice to the fact that it's an anime. And if I had, and because I went and took an anime and dissected it into just words, which, while is part of the pedagogical approach, because that's what I'm kind of teaching, it also it's like dissecting a frog, or like dissecting a joke is like dissecting a frog, or dissecting an anime like this is like dissecting a frog. It nobody enjoys it and the frog dies. So it's like, I feel that does a disservice to the anime by doing it. My delivery of that, however, I think what I presented well in the slide format. My delivery could have used a ton of work, because I spent the whole time looking down and talking to my paper rather than looking up. And part of that is nerves. Part of that is I just didn't have time to prepare as much as I wanted to. It's another thing I would do over, because I'm also other classes and stuff like that. But so I didn't take the time to prepare as well as I would have liked to. So my delivery could have used a lot of work. I would have used, if I had a chance, I would have memorized more of it. I would have taken the mobile clicker and walked and sat in the middle, pacing back and forth and talking to people that way. How it would have been a more fun way of doing it, at least for me. Suggestions for next time. In that, I think this course was plotted very well, it was paced out very well, and that it was adequate to the needs. I didn't have any particular problem with the structure of the course at all. My problems with it came entirely from my own internal issues. The course itself, I think, worked well. It was like I said, it turned out to be one of my more pleasant courses. I didn't fear coming to this course at all, the way I have often feared going to other classes. Since this is going directly to you, the ability to continuously resubmit papers was very helpful, because the writing center turned out to be less helpful. And I'm sure, like you said, you've got your own 499 rewrite in your head. So the idea that, uh, but I had no problem with the course as it was. Um, I would say that the writing center for papers of this length is not a great resource because they have that 4 pages per hour allotted and 8 page per day limit for that you can do. So for your initial half of the essay, it's great, but trying to get people to be able to edit this just the second half of an essay and they haven't read the first half, very not exactly functional. For purely mechanical things, it works, and that since that was most of my issues was a kind of a purely mechanical issue. I mean, I had a couple issues where I changed paragraph order and that kind of stuff, but my content was generally there once I got the content written. Um, what else to say? Like I said, I feared this course a lot coming into it. I thought that I was going to end this course hating writing. I thought I was going to end this course just a terrified, sobbing mess. And of course, it's not the case. So, all I can say to that is thank you for not making this a terrifying, stressful experience any more than it has to be by the nature of the system. So,
Yang? Is that you? Oh, hey, sis! What are you doing here? It's a long story.